Northwest Liberty News, picking the lock on the shackles of tyranny.
Machines are going to fail, and the system's going to fail.
The past is past, the future's now.
Don't look at me. I think these people are completely nuts.
Sometimes trouble just follows a man.
There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus.
Can't you stop your lips from flapping for 2 little minutes?
It's because I'm white.
I'm a man. I'm sensitive. I need to feel loved. I need to be desired.
I'm rapidly becoming a big underground success in this town.
It's a question of methods. Everybody wants results, but nobody wants to do what they have to do to get them done.
And now, coming to you live from Kalispell, Montana, brought to you by Northwest Liberty News, it's Montana Gazette Radio with your host, James White. Okay, I'm your host, James White. This is Montana Gazette Radio. Thanks so much for joining me here today on the broadcast on this 24th day of August, 2021. Got a big show planned for you today. I just want to remind you that all the opening that you just heard and a lot of the stuff that you see now is all going to be changed soon. As I've been speaking about, that computer system finally came in. We got all the hardware necessary. Tonight we'll be downloading of our appointment. We'll be downloading all the software to run the network on the machine this evening. And we'll really looking forward to going on the radio and broadcasting the show, hopefully far and wide across many parts of Montana. And we're just hoping that you support us as we continue to move forward in that endeavor. As I said, I have a big show today here for us today. The first hour is going to be just a few news guys sitting back having a conversation about some things, all Montanans. And we're going to discuss plenty to discuss these days. We're going to have Mark Berryman and J.D. Hall on the broadcast. Mark is the editor of the Sydney Herald, and of course J.D. Hall, Jordan Hall, as you know, has been on the show many times and is the publisher of the Gideon Knox Group and the publisher actually of Montana Daily Gazette. And we're going to welcome both of those gentlemen here to the show. And I'm going to give Mark a proper introduction here. I pulled this off of the website, so Mark, you can certainly finish this and complete it. Mark Berryman has spent nearly 20 years in journalism. His first job was working for the Franklin County Citizen and Royston News Leader, 2 community newspapers in Georgia. He also worked for the Alberton Star, a sister paper. He eventually worked as editor of the Star and then spent 2 years as news director for 2 radio stations before moving to Sydney. He was working at Chiefland Citizen in Chiefland, Florida. Berryman first visited Montana nearly 20 years ago and was smitten. In 2000, he found himself in between jobs and always wanted to go out west. He went online and searched for jobs and eventually landed a seasonal position at the Sweetgrass Ranch in Big Timber as the ranch cook, and the rest, they say, is history. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your microphone here, Mark. JD, go ahead and unmute yours as well. And we certainly do appreciate both you gentlemen joining us here on the show.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us, Jim.
Mark, do you want to fill in that? First of all, Mark, thanks for being here. First time on the broadcast. Again, really appreciate you taking time to come out here with us today. Did I get everything complete there in that bio, Mark? Is there anything that you want to fill in?
Not bad at all. Not bad at all. That pretty much sums up how I got to Montana. You know, as you said, I was here 21 years ago, and for a seasonal job, when I left, I told the people then that I would be back. I didn't realize it would take 21 years to do that.
Well, you know, the good part is you eventually ended up here, and that's the important thing. Because if you look at what's going on, I think, Mark, and we can start this way here. Just let's take a 30,000-foot view, if we can, from both of you. Now, we just found out here yesterday, apparently, that the Moderna vaccine has been approved, and now it looks like they're going to be starting to push the mandatory vaccination, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. The world seems to be spinning in some ways a little out of control, depends upon where you live. Thankfully, in Montana here, it's been a little bit more stable, and I think that's because of really the culture and the people that live here certainly is, you know, don't put up with shenanigans very, very much. But Mark, let's start with you. Give us a 30,000-foot view, if you can, of how things are going here, not only, you know, here in Montana, but nationwide, if you don't mind.
Well, I don't personally think that the approval yesterday is going to have that much of an effect. I think people have already made up their mind whether they want the vaccine or whether they don't want the vaccine. And those that want it, I think pretty much already have it. Those that don't, I don't think, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to willingly do that. I'm still not convinced that a mandate for vaccination will ever fly, but I could be wrong.
JD Hall, Montana, I think, is the only state in the country that is not going to allow employers to force people to get vaccinated. You see, yesterday, Biden's coming out now, really, and it's another whole show altogether. But him getting involved in private business, really, I mean, they shouldn't be encouraging private business to do anything. That's another story altogether. What do you think about this whole vaccine mandate, JD? Is it just the beginning, or do you think? I know in Montana we're going to be able to hold it down, but in other parts of the country, I just don't see him. I don't see him being able to hold it off.
Well, in Montana, we're going to be able to hold it down if Austin Knudsen can hold it down, because that's going to be challenged in federal court. As a matter of fact, yesterday we found out that the guild, the lobby, the union, I'm not sure what you call it, the organization representing the hospitals are all suing the state of Montana because they want to force their customers, their employees to get the vaccine. Even if they're in a clinic and not in a hospital, contrary to HB 702, which, by the way, was barely passed. So while we're proud of Montana, it was barely passed. It was a Hail Mary that was thrown in at the last second after it first failed the U.S. House, the Montana House. Jennifer Carlson did the work to add some appropriations to the bill to be able to get it to pass eventually. Amazingly, our governor signed it. That's good news for all of us. But like when you look at the headlines nationally, you see, I saw yesterday a church that has been closed for the last 12 months said they'll open up only under the condition that the people who attend are vaccinated. And so we have an FDA approval for Moderna now, but I would point out they also approved cigarettes. So to many of us, we don't care exactly what Washington, D.C. thinks. We don't care what the people think who approved the vaccines, because they were the same ones who funded the lab in Wuhan, who even Joe Biden now suspects released the vaccine upon the world through what's called gain of transfer. Joe Biden opened the investigation into that. So when we talk about trusting the experts, it's certain experts, not necessarily all the experts. And I'm glad that Mark has joined us, and I just wanted to compliment him, A, on joining us, B, on his hat, because that's a nice hat. Congratulations on your hat. I wear a hat too, so I appreciate a man in a hat. Now, we're from the same town, and Mark runs the editor of the Sydney Herald, which I've not always in the past had a positive relationship with. And one of the things that we talked about prior to him coming on the show is we're not going to talk about articles and disagreements with the Sydney Herald that I've had over years past prior to him coming to Montana and to run that operation for Wix Publishing out of state. And that's fair. I think that's very fair, because he's not responsible for what someone else, for what previous editors have done. But Jim, the irony here is that the Montana Daily Gazette and Montana Daily Gazette Radio, as it is now called, would not exist if it weren't for the Sydney Herald. And so I saw what I believe to be bias from my local newspaper, or from one of the two local newspapers. The other one, the Roundup, has always been kind and generous to me, and its editor, Jody Wells, is a friend of mine, and or as friendly as an acquaintance can be, I can put it that way. So he's walking into what many people would say would be, I think, prejudgmentally, the lion's den, because when you go to the Montana Daily Gazette website and you click about, you'll see that it was founded because of coverage that I didn't like from the Sydney Herald, that I perceive to be bias. And I wanted to talk about the difference between what is real news and fake news, because Jim, as you are well aware, as the editor of the Montana Daily Gazette, I'm the publisher, but you're the editor. One of our goals is to put an end to the legacy press and to mainstream media in Montana, because I think that it can be done better. And I don't think that, someone told me recently, oh, it was Mark, I think, on the phone. I'll keep our conversation as private as possible, Mark. But I believe it was Mark who said in 20 years, paper might be incredibly rare, something along those lines, in terms of print as a publication. I think it's closer to 5. And the Sydney Herald, although that has been my bugbear, we talk mostly at the Montana Daily Gazette about, say, the Daily Interlake that ran the article about Sheriff Mack, calling him an anti-government activist when he's a government official, or was an elected government official, or the Flathead Beacon, who supposedly, Jim recently said there was nothing to the Whitefish Credit Union scandal.
That was the Daily Interlake. Yeah,
supposedly the Daily Interlake. And then the Billings Gazette laying off half of their news staff, or editorial staff, actually. And then the consolidation of Great Falls, Missoula, and Helena, the outside ownership of Lee Enterprises of most of those big papers, Adams Publishing Group of the Bozeman Chronicle. And then you have other outlets that are not in paper, like the Montana Free Press, that I think probably produces the best news. No offense to our guest, but produces the best statewide news of any of those that I just mentioned. It's got to be at the top of the list. The Montana Free Press, which is not in paper. So considering that many of the publications that Americans rely upon to get their news, say, for example, on the left, the Huffington Post, or on the right, Gateway Pundit, or the Federalist, these are not paper publications. So if it's not paper, and this is my presumption, that it's not paper that makes something real or not. And if we can agree that paper is not going to be around forever, except for maybe toilet paper, unless we adopt the superior technology of the bidet, I'm thinking that paper is going the way of the dinosaur. What makes news real and what makes news fake?
Well, Mark, I want to ask you this. Really, I would think, from my thought, right? So, if we talked on the phone, we're right. We're right. We lean to the right, and we don't make any bones about it. That's the thing. We're not trying to pretend that we're neutral and then slant the news. We come right out and tell you. I don't think, Mark, that truth really should have a political affiliation. I think that should be, as a news person, or as a broadcaster or an editor, that should be the paramount. That should be the goal, is to get to the truth, regardless of what political angle it comes from. As long as you get the truth out, if there's some casualties on your side of the aisle, if it happens, or the other side of the aisle, it doesn't really matter as long as the truth gets out. What's your thought on that, Mark? I mean, do you see that the truth being really way more important than any political viewpoint on a topic?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you on that. I've been voting since I was 18 years old. And if there's an election for dog catcher, I'll be there and I'll vote. That's just the way it is. I know it'll never happen, but I think we should get rid of political parties personally and make people learn what the candidates stand for, what they believe, and what they really, what they are really promising, or what their stance is. I don't think most people know that. I think they go in there and they vote for a blue or they vote for a red, regardless. I don't do that. I research every candidate from local all the way up to national. And I have voted for candidates on both sides of the aisle, to be honest with you, at times.
I appreciate your research on each candidate, because one of the things that I've said about the problem of the political atmosphere in Montana, and we see this in Richland County, is when you have a state that is so overwhelmingly run by one party, which happens to be the Republican Party in our case. Those who disagree, who have a contrarian perspective, like in our case, the Democrats, they don't disappear. They're not raptured into the third heaven. They just run in the Republican Party. So the more dominated your party is, the less that R means by their name. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like at that point, people are putting an R by their name just to get elected. So you have to do the job of researching that candidate by candidate.
Yeah, it happens all the time, and I think it probably happens in, both parties. I think there are people that may not align totally with the Republican Party. They don't feel like they fit in there, so they'll put a D by their name, even though they probably don't fit over there either. And I think history. If you look back in history, there have been plenty of people that have swapped parties. But I want to get back to something you said when you were talking about earlier about the papers. I don't have an exact figure. Yeah, I did say about 20 years. I think that it'll be almost all digital, if not all digital by then. But the thing is, you got to look at what your goal is, what your purpose is. For us at the Sydney Herald, I only do state news that I feel like directly affects our area. I don't do a ton of it. We'll put some stuff in there, but that's not our focus. Our folks are the folks here in Richland County. And as long as we do that, I think we have a viable product for our people. And, we just got to be true to who we are and what we are. And that is a local newspaper. I cover almost no national news, and I think that's true for you as well. You are.
Well, for the most part, yeah. Unless it's a slow news day, we try to stick to Montana news. Sometimes there's a slow news day, and you're well aware of news cycles, and that sometimes it's like there's nothing going on. That's
there are days you are scrambling.
But you said you wouldn't discuss articles that had come out before your publication, because I'm, as the entire listening audience knows, I'm not a fan of the former editor. But one thing that I do enjoy doing is burying hatchets, and I would love to bury. I'd love to bury the hatchet with the Sydney Herald.
Well, I don't have a hatchet with you.
Well, I have a hatchet. I have a hatchet with the Sydney Herald that I'm not.
I understand that, but
that I'm not personally,
I think our 45 minutes. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm not asking for any comment from you, and it'll just be a brief comment from me, but I didn't say that I wouldn't address our previous articles in the Sydney Herald. I'm just going to address one, though. And that was a letter to the editor, which is not the same as an article that comes out of the newspaper, granted, but it is an editorial decision as to what letters to the editor that you send. And you have assured me, Mark, that you do your best to put letters to the editor from whoever, if you get it. You try to put it in the paper.
So far, I've had no problem with that.
When did you become the editor of the paper?
My first day, although I wasn't officially over the paper, my first day was February 22nd.
Okay. So I'll put it this way. It is not my experience that has always been the editorial policy of the Sydney Herald, because as the president of the Conservatives for Richland County, and also the chairman, the state committee man for the Republican Central Committee, we stopped using the Sydney Herald and basically stopped paying you for advertising because of perceived bias, because we would send letter after letter after letter after letter that would never get in the paper. But a Democrat would send a letter to the editor and bam, it would be in the paper automatically. But certain Jim Steinbeiser called the Montana Daily Gazette fake news, at which point we've been able to, by the praise of God, develop a readership that's digital that is greater than the online readership of the Billings Gazette or the Bozeman Chronicle or the Great Falls Tribune or the Daily Interlake or any of the Montana Free Press. We've been able to do that, and on top of that, acquire radio stations to broadcast over the AM airwaves. So you mentioned a second ago, you try to stick to local news that are local or that have a local impact. Let me put it that way. Right.
Yeah.
But when I looked at the Sydney Herald this morning, I usually get up and I don't get out of bed for an hour because I'm reading my news feeds, and I have an entire team that does that but they don't stick to Montana news. They stick to national news because we've got a lot of different websites that look at news, and they do that for me. But I looked at the Montana website. Actually, to be fair, this was sent to me. This was published today. Montana evangelical Christians call for senators to resolve the plight of dreamers. That was today. That was under you. I don't know if you published that or had someone else do it. But you mentioned the evangelical immigration table signed by 30 evangelical pastors, leaders, and lay people urging Danes and Tester to address the situation of dreamers. So you mentioned the evangelical immigration table. So let me ask you some questions right quick. Are you aware that the evangelical immigration table is started, funded, founded, and run by the National Immigration Forum?
Well, first of all, you're talking about an opinion piece, not a news piece.
I just saw it prominently headlined on the.
Well, I understand you got it online, and it's not broken down
on the front page.
That's pretty much an opinion piece, more or less. And yes, I publish it. I publish things from both sides, from every side that we get it in. I'm not
trying to pick on you, but that is an editorial. That's an editorial decision as to what you put in the newspaper.
Yes, and
okay,
it is. And my job as editor is to cover all opinions, not unlike you.
Okay,
I cover every opinion, whether I agree with it or not.
Let me give a hypothetical. And this was an opinion piece, but I don't see on the website as to who it was. The print edition may say whose opinion this was, but it doesn't have an auditor, or rather an author attributed to it. But it mentions the evangelical immigration table. The evangelical immigration table is funded by the National Immigration Forum. The National Immigration Forum was started by the Open Societies Foundation, which is George Soros. This is a Soros organization. A very prominent broadcaster named Eric Metaxas, very prominent, makes the national news all the time. I'm sure you've probably heard of Eric Metaxas. Got off of the National Immigration Forum, the Evangelical Immigration Table, which we call the EIT in Christian publishing, which is run by Russell Moore of the ERLC and Jim Wallace of Sojourners. He got off of the EIT when he discovered that it was run by George Soros. So this is a Soros organization who's not a Montanan, who has a newspaper promoting 30 Montana clergy who've signed on to this document in favor of the decimation of national sovereign borders. But not a word was spoken of the origins of the evangelical immigration table. So I'm assuming that this was something that you saw, that you aggregated, that you put on the website. But we would say
it's both in print and it's online. I believe that's on our faith page. Once again, it's not a news page.
Hypothetically, would you allow me to be able to point out, hey, this organization, by the way, is funded by George Soros?
You can write a letter to the editor if you like. I'm not going to put a politically based piece on the second page because it's
you did in this one. This is politically based. George Soros runs the EIT.
Yes, but that's the focus you're looking at. What I saw was 30 Montana pastors had this opinion, and I used it. Now, I understand you're not a fan of them. I'm not saying whether I am or not. That's not my job. My job is to cover every opinion. Unlike yours, you focus on one, and you do a great job of that. I'm just, you can write a letter to the editor if you like, but you cannot.
But this wasn't. But is it fair and balanced to say I'm going to publish this in the faith page, but not allow an opposing opinion? Not an opinion, an opposing fact that this is not 30 Montana-based clergy. This is George Soros.
I'm not, you know what? I'm not going to get into an argument with you over this.
Okay, let's not do that. Let's not do an argument.
If you want to turn this into a hatchet job, you're not bearing the hatchet, and that's exactly what you're doing, Jordan.
No, I'm going somewhere. I'm going somewhere with this.
No, you're not. Your whole goal, it appears to me, your whole purpose for having me on here was to try to improve your standing and belittle our news.
That wasn't my.
Hold on a second. I'm not.
That's not my purpose to have you on here.
Jim, hold on a second. Jim, if you would, you can't speak for me, but please assure Mark that that's not my. That you won't let me do that.
No, that's not. Of course, not at all. That's not when Mark and I had this conversation. I assured him that's not what this is. Just to get to know him and talk about Montana news and you know, my next question was going to be
that was all the build up to a question, and that is, what is fake news in your opinion, as opposed to true news, and how do you define journalism? How is journalism to be defined? In particular, when it comes to, is there a difference between journalism and investigative reporting? So that was just, if you would, take my word for it. I don't mean any malice. Is there a difference between journalism and investigative reporting?
Well, investigative reporting is a part of journalism. It's journalism is a much wider, a broader concept than that. And, you know, for places and staffs that have plenty of people, I think there's plenty of room for investigative journalism. I think you living here, you know how small our staff is. I don't have time for a lot of investigative journalism, to be honest with you.
Right.
You know, and
so I have an appreciation for the publications that do a lot of that investigative journalism. And ironically, they're on the left. So I think the New York Times has a lot of field reporters. They report a lot of stuff that they only find out themselves. Right. WAPO has a lot of good stuff. And ironically, I think Vice, I don't know how much attention you pay to Vice. I think Vice does a lot of good investigative reporting. Like, they'll send reporters into war zones and into the Klan, you know, to come up with a story. And I don't agree with any of them politically, but I can say that's real journalism because they did some real investigation. Do you perceive that there is, in local media, by local, I mean, whether it's statewide or the Mondac, North Dakota, Wyoming, the West, or anywhere else that you've worked, for that matter, do you perceive that there is a reliance upon others to do that work? Say, for example, the Associated Press, instead of us doing that research ourselves? And if so, is that a problem?
Unfortunately, I think that is a problem. And the problem comes into, you know, we have basically a very small staff here. You know, as editor, I'm also required to produce a certain amount of copy as well. We have a staff currently of 2 people in editorial.
Can you define that? What does that mean, copy? You said you have to produce so much copy. What do you mean? Like aggregation?
You know, so many stories, you know, for the paper per week, you know, and our editorial staff is 2 people. One of them covers primarily sports. The other one not only has to do reporting and stuff like that, but I also have to produce the paper twice a week. You know, there are only so many hours in a day, and
you have so many papers to fill on any given. Like, you have a limitation I don't have, which is
exactly.
You can't have a blank piece of paper in your paper.
No, and I don't get the opportunity to pick and choose. Well, today this edition is going to be primarily about this topic. You know, we've got to cover a little bit of everything, and you know, sports, you know, news, meetings, the whole 9 yards, and we have to do it with 2 people. You know, and so I think investigative journalism gets overlooked or gets a back seat simply out of time constraints, you know.
Folks, I'm going to take a quick commercial break here. It's about the bottom of the hour. Before we do, though, Mark, why don't you go ahead and give out websites that people can go visit? If you have any email addresses, of course, that you want to give out that people can send you messages after the show, or any Facebook pages or YouTube channels, anything like that you want to give out before we take a break. Mark?
Do what?
I said any of that information you want to give out before we take a break, your websites or Facebook pages or anything like that before we take a break.
The newspaper is at sydneyherald.com. I'm not going to give out a personal one. I don't really have a personal website or anything.
I think the Facebook page is also sydneyherald.com.
It is.
Right, yeah.
Sydney Herald for the Facebook as well.
So if somebody wanted to send you, I think it's an editor at Sydney Herald. If somebody wanted to send you a follow-up email after, that's public, right? The editor email.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And email
about.
email address editor at sydneyherald.com. And, I would encourage people that are listening to this, I would encourage them to write letters to the editor for our newspaper. I actually need more than I'm getting. I'm getting more columns than letters to the editor. I appreciate that.
Just wait till that primary, brother.
I'm sure that it'll crank up a little bit then.
JD Hall, of course, MontanaDailyGazette.com, MontanaDailyGazette.com, GideonKnox.com. And we're going to take a quick commercial break. If you want to support this broadcast, you can go to MontanaGazetteRadio.com. And all the shows now are being simulcast live on that page through Rumble. Also, our new Rumble channel is Montana Gazette Radio on Rumble. Search for us there. And we do appreciate you supporting us and passing around the video and passing around the articles. We'll be back after these brief messages with Mark Berryman, editor of Sydney Herald, and Pastor J.D. Hall from the Montana Daily Gazette. I'm your host, James White. If you like classic cars, exceptional service, and a money-back guarantee, then the Corner Shop in beautiful downtown Kalispell is the place for you. Whether it's an oil change, engine diagnostic, suspension work, or brakes all around, the Corner Shop has you covered. With expert technicians and a free consultation on all services, you can't go wrong with the Corner Shop. Did I mention the classic cars? While you're waiting for your expert service to be performed, take a stroll through the showroom to see Kalispell's smoothest collection of classic cars. The Corner Shop is conveniently located at 1212 South Main, just south of the courthouse. The Corner Shop is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m., so drop by for an appointment or call 755-7777. That's 755-7777. The Corner Shop, Kalispell's full-service auto repair facility. Hi, this video is brought to you by PatriotPrepared.com, where right now you can save $250 on each large package purchase, plus get free shipping to the continental United States. In these troubled times, it's not a bad idea to have some extra food storage available, and you can save big at Patriot Prepared right now. Go to PatriotPrepared.com, that's PatriotPrepared.com, and use the code TRUMP250 at checkout to receive your savings today. Okay, folks, thanks for hanging out after the break. If you have not got any storable food yet or water filtration, probably now is a good time to do so. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, of course, and this is not fear-mongering, but it's not a bad idea just to have some insurance. It's like your house is probably not going to burn down, but you have insurance for that. Not a bad idea to have some food insurance as well, and you can get big savings and find everything you need over at PatriotPrepared.com. That's PatriotPrepared.com. Okay, thanks again for joining us here and hanging out after the break. We're going to be welcome once again. We're going to welcome Mark Berryman, the editor of Sydney Herald, and Pastor J.D. Hall back to the program. Let me unmute the microphones here and have you gentlemen come back in. Thanks so much, fellas, thanks so much for hanging on after the break. We do appreciate having you both here on the show today. Mark, as we were talking about before, we're talking about investigative journalism. What's happened to investigative journalism? I mean, that used to be sort of the lifeblood of a news agency. It used to be sort of the fourth estate where the journalists were supposed to keep an eye on the powers that be and report on them and keep them in line and keep the folks informed about, our so-called leaders, what they're up to. It just doesn't seem like that happens anymore these days, Mark. It seems like people just choose sides And really, again, the truth is the casualty in all this. What's your thoughts, Mark? What happened to investigative journalism? And can we ever get it back like like it used to be? I guess is to use a phrase.
As we were talking about before, it's a matter of time and finances. Every newsroom that I know, and we're talking primarily newspapers right here, they're getting smaller and smaller, and there are fewer and fewer people to do that job. And so I think that the amount of time people have to actually do that kind of work is getting tough to find, to be honest with you. I don't really have time to research every little thing that I get into the newspaper. I read it, and if it seems like a viable thing, I'll use it. If not, I'll trash it. I will say I do need to do a little bit better job locally of that kind of thing. And I think I've only been here 6 months. 6 months here at this job, and it's taken me a little while to get used to the system here and the whole 9 yards. I do want to do a little bit better job of local investigative reporting. I don't have time to do state or national stuff. I really don't. I'll leave that to you guys. Yeah. Your forte is a little bit wider audience, so more state oriented. And I'll allow you guys. I'll do that for you.
I have rarely, if ever, seen anything in the Sydney Herald that was a local story that I thought was done poorly. It's been more editorial decisions and letters to the editor that have irked me, but in the past. But let's have a segment that hopefully we can agree on. Okay, that's part of burying the hatchet. One of the banes of my existence is the quote independent third-party fact checker, which drives me nuts, which has cost me $250,000 that I can demonstrate I did as a part of congressional testimony this session, a year for the last 2 years. The third-party fact checkers, for example, we reported on the individuals setting fires to our national forests last summer. All we did was take the police mugshots and information of their suspects that they arrested and charged with arson, and then we compared it to their Facebook pages and found out that they were leading Antifa riots weeks before. And then the third-party fact checkers come in and say, not true. They don't say why it's not true necessarily, just not true. We don't find this credible. And then all of a sudden we're throttled in social media, and we have to work around, I call it playing whack-a-mole, to try to get our information directly to the consumers because we don't have the paper subscription. That's actually one advantage you have. I don't, as of right now. Now I have to rely on people coming to me, but the problem is it's Google and Facebook that's pushing content to me. But the downside that you expressed in terms of investigative reporting, not having the time, I remember the good old days of the Sydney Herald, and this is a non-controversial statement, so don't get your hackles up. But Bill Vanderweel, before the editor before him, or maybe he's gone back and forth a few times, but Bill was at everything. I actually kind of in my heart secretly, have you met Bill, by the way?
No, I have not.
I actually worried about Bill because every time I showed up to a school board meeting, to a sporting event, to a town hall forum, or to some really boring, mundane things I found myself surprised to be at, Bill was there with his notebook and clipboard. And so not only was he expected to be the editor of the paper, he was also expected to be the primary writer for the paper. And that made it difficult. So I know that there's stress on the local newsroom to be able to produce that material because you have to wear the hat of editor /writer decision makers / I'm sure there's a business end of things. There has to be when it comes to advertising and everything else. And so one of the reasons why digital print or the Montana Gazette has done so well is because we have one thing that you lack, which is no shortage of individuals to do investigative reporting and to research, most of whom don't have to be paid because they're believers in a cause. So that's one of the reasons why we've been able to, in some cases, beat conventional media. But back to the third-party fact checkers, the local Roundup newspaper, which is not you guys, but it's the county newspaper, and they cover into McKenzie County, North Dakota, into Watford City, etc. They covered a Republican meeting where Matt Rosendale, Representative Matt Rosendale attended. And they fact-checked him in the newspaper in regard to something he said on COVID-19. And I called Jody, the editor, and said, in my view, it's inappropriate. You can't claim to be impartial on one hand while you're checking, quote unquote, the facts of an elected representative. But that's being done on mass scale. Now, we were fact checked, for example, when we did an article about the LGBTQ standing in line, demanding to stand in line first for the COVID vaccine. This was a year before the vaccine came out, because if they have AIDS, they have immune problems, and therefore it would only make sense that they get the vaccine first. That article went viral in Africa, where they have a lot of AIDS problems, obviously. And then we were fact checked by a Facebook independent fact checker that is based in Africa that said this story's not true. Very little explanation as to why it wasn't true, but it was true. But here's the one I really hate, Bill. I hope you agree with me. I hope we can agree on this. One of the biggest quote unquote fact checkers out there is USA Today. Now, I don't want you to pick a fight with USA Today, but the fact checkers, some of them work in media, and they know darn well that when they quote unquote check the facts of other media outlets, they're intentionally killing their competition or their competition's reach. The big boys, USA Today, if they fact check an article by the Montana Daily Gazette, or let's just say hypothetically, if they did the Sydney Herald, then Facebook suddenly says your news feed isn't going to show up in everybody else, or rather your Facebook page is not going to show up in everybody's news page. So the way the throttle works is they have to go to the Facebook URL and type in sydneyherald.com to see your news, instead of it just organically, because most people scroll on Facebook, right? Like they don't type in their friends' names. They just scroll and see what their friends are saying. For a news publication to engage in quote unquote fact checking of other news publications, knowing that it will be used against them, I think is an inappropriate use of the First Amendment. To me, it feels like being stabbed in the back by a compatriot, because like we don't have a union. I mean, there is a union, but I'm not a member of a journalist union, but we still stick together generally. We believe, generally, we believe in freedom of the press. So when Jake Tapper, for example, was prosecuted by the Obama administration because he wouldn't release a source, you had conservatives and liberals in media go, that's not how the First Amendment works. He can protect his source. Or when Greenwald released his expose on Edward Snowden and had to flee to South America, we were on the left and the right going, no way, that's not how you treat journalists. And even with President Trump, some of the things that he said from the podium about journalists, you had some conservatives go, no, that's not how you treat journalists. Whether we agree with you or not, that's not how you should do it. So what's your role? What do you believe the role of fact checking ought to be for the media as it pertains to social media? What's your thoughts on that? And by the way, when I called Jody Wells, I just want to add this. When I called Jody and I said, I don't want to see a fact check in another Roundup newspaper, because I think it's inappropriate. It's not your place to fact check. Let it be done in some other article. Let it be done in a letter to the editor. Let it be done elsewhere. We don't need your edit, because by adding your editorial content in the middle of an article right after the representative spoke, to me, I perceive that as bias. What's your take on that?
Well, I probably don't need quite as much time as you did for the opinion on that.
Praise God.
But because I can sum up my opinion of like Facebook or social media fact checkers in one sentence: they're about as useless as tits on a boar hog. They really are.
Jim White, I think I like this guy.
Well, of course we do like him. Well, you know, do
you title your shows, Jim? You could title it "Useless as Tits on a Boar Hog."
Yeah, I could do that. Well, Mark, this brings up a point. That was going to. My next question was, with as we stated before, with the shrinking newsroom and the inability really to have investigative reporters. A lot of newsrooms, including the Montana Daily Gazette, are relying on the folks that are there with their cell phones, or they're there at the location and they're putting a report out, or they're putting something on social media with a pic. What I'm finding is that the thing that's been the problem with me for the longest time now. Is there a plane going? There must be a plane going by.
I was
or
going to
something.
say somebody might be muted. I don't know. I'm right by the airport, but I don't think it's me.
So what I find?
No, it's a lawnmower going by my window.
Oh no, we're good. What I think the hardest thing for me, Mark, and it has been for several years now, is getting down to exactly what the truth is. Because, as we stated, when people are sending out posts, I mean, you have a tendency to want to believe what you see on a post on Facebook. You want to believe what people, even when they have photos, sometimes are not telling the truth. Do you find it more and more difficult, Mark, as you've evolved over the years? You've been a newsman for 20 years now. The thing I've found in the last several years especially, it's been so harder to get to what the essence of the truth is, because the disinformation, like the truth has kind of went away and the disinformation has sort of filled that vacuum. Do you sort of see that as well?
Yeah, well, first, let's say this. If you're getting your facts and your news and your information from Facebook, you're in trouble. You're not going to get it there. Now you can get it from a reputable source that is on Facebook, but if you're believing everything you're reading on Facebook, you really need to reexamine.
Do you mean like the post? You mean like from your friends, what they might post?
Yeah, not necessarily, your side or my side. It's fine if you get an article, from a respected or, an actual source. But I think a lot of it is just made up. And get back to the fact checkers. Why are fact checkers even bothering fact checking satire sites? They're not trying to put out truth.
I think the answer to that is it is their means of censorship.
Oh, exactly.
They don't want to call it censorship.
That's exactly what it is.
That's what
our former president doesn't even have, our former president isn't even allowed to be on social media because of censorship.
Yeah, see, I think we're agreeing fine in this part of the program.
Fact checkers.
So does the Sydney Herald then, and if you can't answer this, or if this is the place of Wix Publishing to add, feel free not to answer. But do you engage in fact checking, other than, internally with your articles? Do you engage in, let's say, Steve?
Are you talking about? Yeah, no.
Steve Dane says something that you don't believe to be true, so you fact check him in the article.
To a certain extent, I do, but I don't fact check stuff in my newspaper, as you were pointing out earlier. If I've got a question as to whether there's something that's just blatantly wrong, yeah, I do not fact check opinion pieces in any way. That people are allowed to have an opinion on anything they want. And take that opinion, no matter how wrong I may think they are. I'm not going to fact check an opinion piece.
What about an elected representative like Rosendale? Or
I don't have time to fact check this stuff. I really don't. And, you know, if he sends me a press release, it's going to go as is. Somebody writes an opposing opinion on that, I'm going to print it.
You know, the irony is the Montana Daily Gazette has been kicked off of Facebook for violating the opinion of a third-party fact checker, for which Facebook now has apologized to the world and has said, what we're talking about is whether or not the lab in Wuhan might be responsible for COVID. And now Facebook reversed that policy and said, you can now say that on Facebook. But they didn't release the ban.
Right.
I mean, right. So we're still banned for saying what is now agreeable to say because the president has said it. And so I'm saying in terms of free speech, either it's free or it's not free.
Or it's not. Exactly. And you know, everybody's got a right to their opinion. I don't care how wrong I may think you may be or right you may be, you know. Everybody's got that right. You know, that's one of the founding principles this country was built on, and it's being eroded at a remarkable rate.
Well, you know, that go ahead,
Jim.
JD. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one of the things that it's Mark, right? That Mark told me on the phone when we talked the other day, because what happened was I took a shot at the Sydney Herald on my Facebook page, my Conservatives for Richland County Facebook page, and to his credit, he responded quite whimsically. It could have been harsher, but so that prompted a phone call for me, and I thought that we had a good conversation, and I felt like my religion column was taken years ago, and what Mark said was write a religion column and see if I print it. I mean, you know, write it. You know, they're different editors. He doesn't take credit for what other editors have done, and that would be unfair for me to ascribe to him the blame for what other editors have done. And ultimately, I'm sure that's the call of you know, the newspaper owner. But we have a situation in this country where there's something dangerous happening with media that I hope that we can agree with, and that is it's more polarized than ever. So when you censor, say for example, what with the Montana Daily Gazette, what you end up with is people going to the Telegram group for InfoWars. Okay, so when you censor, and as a matter of fact, U.S. intelligence has said censoring people, not just opinions, from social media drives them underground to groups like Signal or Telegram or private communications, where we were just sitting back at the NSA watching them run their mouth and knowing what they're doing. Now we can't even, because they're using encryption, find out where the bad guys are or what they're doing. So it seems to be bad for everybody. I don't know, Jim. I don't want to take over your program, but it seems to me that it doesn't help the small guy, the little guy, the legacy press. The only people it seems to help is the mainstream media. But even then, when you look at the MSM, they won't say certain things. Like, so for example, I've got my hat here that has my opinion on it. Well, it's not my opinion, it's a fact. Fauci lied. And I have that because I feel like it, number one. Secondly, I was wearing it earlier today, but secondly, Fauci said at the beginning of the pandemic, do not wear masks. They do not help. They are not efficacious to stop the spread of COVID. Then we all remember the famous interview that he did. Jim, I'm sure you remember the interview where he said, no, I knew it prevented COVID, but I said that because we didn't want people running out buying PPE gear when it was needed in the hospitals.
Yep.
Okay. So you lied for a reason, but you still lied. And in Montana, there's not much worse that can be said about a man than that he lied. Like not being, if you shake somebody's hand and your handshake's not good, that's almost a community anathema right there.
Fellas, we're just running out of time here. We got another guest coming up here in just in a couple of minutes. But before we do go, I want to end on. I want to talk, if we can, here, just finalize a couple of points here. What do we need to do going forward? There's no panacea, there's no magic bullet, but what do we need to do to start maybe encouraging a younger crop of reporters, or the youth, or the young adults these days? What do we need to do to get honesty back into journalism, where it's not biased and they really are, once again, truly the fourth estate that really is works for the people and not for any political parties? Mark, you want to start off with that and see? I know we're just pontificating here, but I'll put it over to you.
All right, yeah. Basically, I think you pretty much have to change the mind of the people first. The direction we're headed that is so polarized right now. I'm still friends with people of multiple viewpoints. At the end of the day, we can disagree, and you're still my friend. But I don't think until we can start chipping away at the national opinion, at the way things are going nationally, you're not going to change the news format. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but you've got to be able to convince the people in general that polarization is a bad thing, and if you do that, the media will come around.
JD, 1 minute. We've just got to.
Well,
go ahead.
Telling a preacher 1 minute is good luck with that. We'll do our best. This wasn't just a random rant on Fauci. My point was, in 99% of the newspapers in America, you can't say Fauci lied. Despite the fact that he's on video saying he lied, you can't say it. So I wonder how much of the free press that we're guaranteed in the First Amendment is translated to the freedom of the press that we find in the First Amendment. And it's because publishers won't let it through, editors won't let it through, newspaper owners won't let it through, even though it's factual. But I can't answer the question that you asked, Mark, because I don't agree with the supposition in your question, Jim, which is how we can make it fair or whatever term you use, non-biased. News has always been biased. I don't like Walter Cronkite because he's America's newsman. Right?
I just want honesty, not necessarily unbiased. I just want honesty back in the news.
That's my thing. I guess that's more my thing than non-bias. When all of America came together at 6 o'clock to watch the nightly news, they realized they had to put together a news program that almost everybody could walk away from thinking that, not being upset, right? But you have half the newspapers in America called the Republican or the Democrat. So who are the non-biased news sources today? Is it MSNBC or is it Fox News? Is it Tucker Carlson or is it Rachel Maddow? Is it the Montana Daily Gazette or is it the Bozeman Chronicle? So what I would ask first and foremost is for newspapers to be honest about their bias if they have one. And secondly, if they don't have a bias, just do everything humanly possible to erase that bias. And I don't think it's possible to have a publication without bias. It's going to have one. Even in terms of what content you run, there's a bias. But so long as it can be acknowledged, there's a respect that the consumer will give to say they lean one way or another way, but it's only by 1/8 of an inch. They're not way over here somewhere. That I think our news consumers will appreciate is the honesty in the bias. That we have honesty. Does that make sense?
Indeed.
They may be biased, but they're honest about their biasy, as opposed to Fox News, fair and balanced. I remember being a teenager going, "You're not fair and balanced." What a load of malarkey! You're not fair and balanced. You're on the right.
Fellas,
don't lie to me.
We're just out of time. I hate to cut you off, but we just got another guest waiting. SydneyHerald.com. SydneyHerald.com to find more out about Mark Berryman and his work. And, of course, Pastor J.D. Hall is the publisher for Montana Daily Gazette.com. And, of course, you can support us by going there or Montana GazetteRadio.com. Mark, I appreciate you coming on today, brother. You too, JD.
Glad to be here.
We'd love to have you back on again as we continue to move
We'll
forward.
do it.
I mean,
we'll do it at some point.
Yeah, we're interested in what's going on out east as well. I mean, I'm centered here in Kalispell, of course, but Montana, you know, we stand behind everyone in Montana, not just people here.
One last thing. 5 seconds. Mark and I both have the same ambition, I'm sure, and that is to convince people in Montana that something east of Billings actually does in fact exist.
You're right about that.
Well, I'm glad we can end on a positive note and come to terms on things. Well, fellas, I appreciate you both coming on here. As I said, I got another guest waiting in the wings, and we of course will have you both hopefully back on again if you accept the invitation. Mark Berryman, thanks so much for being here. Pastor JD Hall, great to have you gentlemen on, and we'll be talking to you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye. Okay, folks, we're gonna go ahead and bring in our next guest here, Drew Zinecker, who's been on. I gotta see if I can get. There we go. Get JD from here. We're gonna get Drew Zinecker here coming on next and see if we can get. There we go. Okay, so we've got everybody's gone now. So let's bring on Drew, and then we'll take a quick commercial break. Drew, there we go. Okay, so let's take off here. Drew Zinecker. Drew, thanks for joining us here. We're going to take a quick commercial break. If you could, good to see you. Thanks. Welcome back. Glad you're back.
You as well.
We just literally bailed out on the last two guests, and we're kicking this off without even really taking much of a break. You're using your mobile phone, obviously. Do you have a swivel where you can turn it sideways? Do you have that capability on that phone
yes.
where you can turn it? There you go. Now you got it good. All right.
Better?
Very good, sir.
Okay.
Of course, joining us here is Drew Zinecker. We're going to take a quick commercial break here in a minute, but this is our friend of the show, Drew Zinecker, been on the show numerous times. Just got back from traveling abroad and ran into some of the stuff. You know, he's here today with some photos and some of the vaccine stuff that's being, you know, put out, and propaganda and all kinds of stuff that's being put out overseas. I think you went to Paris, right? You went to France, and
yes.
Is that it? You went to France, or you went? I thought you went to other
places.
France.
Okay,
France. Been there. Cool place. Not so much these days, but it used to be. We feel that it is now. Anyway, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and this, of course, is not Mark Berryman, and this is. Let's go over here to the number 2 guest, and then. So let's take this off here, Drew. I've got you set up here, I believe. I think the program's frozen. Can you still hear me, Drew?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I think my program is frozen here, unfortunately. Isn't that something? That doesn't happen very often. Okay, see if I can take a quick commercial break. We'll be back after these brief messages. Nope. Okay, well, this is interesting. So my it looks like my program is frozen here, Drew. So I'm going to have to do is I may have to reset it and stay on the line here, stay on the Zoom, and I'll reset it and come back on here in just a minute. So we're going to go ahead and put you on mute, and we'll be back with Drew Zinecker after we're just going to go ahead and reset this, folks. Sorry about this. Live radio. I don't know what happened. This thing seems they hung up on me. I got the new computer sitting in. There it is right there. Okay, good. If you like classic cars, exceptional service, and a money-back guarantee, then the Corner Shop in beautiful downtown Cal. Okay, so there's obviously a delay on everything here. Everything is just queued up, and it all started at the same time. So, Drew,